T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence podcast. Today I've got Agensleti, a returning guest and a member of Mongrel Squad, one of the prominent pirate gangs in Star Citizen, and we're gonna talk about the cargo refactor and how it's gonna complicate gameplay, and obviously how it's gonna expand gameplay. Wink, wink. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, mate. Yeah, pretty chuffed about cargo refactor and the news that we've got on it recently. That cargo AMA was a pretty big deal to us.
Yeah, the AMA was almost more useful than the ISC. So it's like, you guys gotta reformat that. But it's pretty nice to finally hear about it. We've been waiting for the cargo refactor for such a long time, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of what it includes, what it doesn't include, kind of what people are expecting, and how it's going to progress after this. So I guess for anybody who hasn't seen you or doesn't know your content or anything like that, how about you give them a little rundown on what you do and why you're here today?
So I'm the leader of Mongrel Squad, and we're a pirate organization in Star Citizen. Now, a lot of people sit there and say that we don't, piracy's not in game yet, and we have a YouTube channel full of videos that say otherwise. So pretty much if you really want to see what we're about, then the best way to do that is to go check out our YouTube channel. Just Mongrel Squad Star Citizen, you'll find our videos there. Or you can look up Star Citizen Piracy gameplay and you'll find our videos that way too.
Not the only pirate squad in the game, obviously. There's plenty of people who are trying this stuff, but I've realized you guys do a good job of opening up the profession, if whatever you want to call it, opening up that type of activity to allow people outside to kind of get an idea of what it involves and what the possibilities are. And there's like a lot of controversy surrounding piracy and how it's done and what constitutes piracy. We actually talked about that in episode, I think it was 61, we said something like that. Yeah, episode.
We had a pretty good conversation on that.
Yeah, so if you want to get more in-depth discussion about piracy specifically and why it's actually a thing in the game, I would check that episode out. But for today, we're getting deeper into the details to talk about the cargo refactor and how it affects all of that. So to get us started off, why don't we talk about the general idea of the cargo refactor and what it's bringing to the game? So it's kind of three parts. You got the physicalization of the cargo, the way that the cargo persists from the ship after the ship has blown up and it kind of is, floating out in space or inside of the ship or whatever. And then also they're expanding the cargo box sizes to something we haven't actually gotten to use before because we've always used the 1/8 SU boxes. What's your general take on all of this so far?
Well, it's more or less they're finally caught up with what they were telling us years ago now. So, like, the physicalization of cargo has always been CIG's intent, and part of the reason for that was to facilitate piracy gameplay, but it was also to provide more granular and immersive experience for cargo haulers, so that when they were actually loading up their ships, it would actually take time for them to do. They would have to hire NPCs or they would have to do it themselves. CIG could differentiate, like the levels of support that cargo haulers could get at different, locations. So, like if you're out on the frontier, you're probably loading your own cargo. But if you're in, highly, secure, populated space like Terra or something like that, then you'd be able to hire a bunch of NPCs and they'd do it for you.
Yeah.
So, like, from my understanding, it was just about making cargo hauling a bit more granular than just putting boxes into your ship and just taking them from one place to another. Like, there are going to be additional factors that you had to take into account. And from the piracy side of things, when it came to cargo refactor or the physicalization of cargo, it's like, it means that pirates have to, invest more time into the act. And if they want to make maximum profit, then they can't just go in there, guns blazing without any sort of consideration for their actions. if they're after maximum profit. Like they have to be more strategic about how they play, and that also plays into how cargo haulers can react to a piracy attack as well. And then there's salvaging gameplay, the ability to recover, any sort of cargo that you may have lost because of catastrophic issues with your ship. So it's one of those things where it's like cargo refactor it's going to change the game a lot more than what people realize in terms of granularity and immersiveness for how we interact with trade commodities over the long term. But for now, like what we've got for tier 0 is literally boxes are just being physicalized, and CIG is, we're not seeing it, but they're already doing the background stuff to set up cargo for when they do increase those box sizes, because we've gone from 1/8 boxes to 1 SCU boxes, and like from many moons ago, I believe there was a jump point about it where they were talking about the different cargo box sizes, and they were talking about 16 SCU size boxes and 32 and 64, kind of like shipping containers that we have in real life, how you got the different dimensions of shipping containers. That's what CIG is aiming for with the cargo boxes, and this is like the first step where they're actually doing that.
Yeah. So you mentioned it's the physicalization of the boxes, and you also mentioned it's T0. I think that's pretty important. There's a lot of conversation about T0 versus T1. That's tier 0 and tier 1, kind of the level of development the feature is into. I know there's like a technical definition of the whole tiers that game developers know. I don't know because I don't make games. But as you said, tier 0, kind of the first implementation. And I think just for the rest of the episode to set those sort of expectations, this is a literal refactor of cargo. They're not adding on to the system we had before, besides maybe making the boxes bigger, but they are literally taking what we had before, switching it to a different system, and then giving it back to us as almost the same thing, functionality-wise, right? Instead of, I mean, when I say functionality, I'm ignoring the fact that we can now move the boxes and place them on the ships and everything, but in terms of like, we're not trading commodities physically, we're not manually loading and doing all this stuff. We're still doing what we used to do, just with a different type of cargo, right?
Yeah, so they talk about this in the ISC when they were talking about cargo refactor, where when we got cargo hauling for 3.0, it was like the boxes themselves pretty much just had to be locked together and treated as like a mass entity. And you couldn't separate them. They were just like a mass. That was it. And they had to gamify the whole piracy gameplay, where destroying the ship resulted in the 1/8 boxes spawning, so that you could actually get something out of it. Like they could try and encourage a little bit of piracy gameplay there, or cargo haulers, if for whatever reason their ship blew up, they would have an opportunity to get their like a small portion of their cargo back. But now, like, this has gone in the direction of what they actually wanted to achieve with boxes being physicalized. So when you buy cargo, it's still going to be a mass of boxes loaded onto your ship. It's just those boxes are now individuals that snap together.
Yeah.
So like, from our perspective of a lot of the flow of what we do on the gameplay side of things, for cargo haulers, not much really changes in terms of like, buy cargo, move it somewhere else, sell the cargo there. Like, that hasn't really changed.
Yeah. It's kind of a bummer. There weren't more of those kinds of changes to make. Sorry about that. Got the call to prayer in the background. There weren't more of those integral like feature changes to make the actual trading gameplay more exciting. But it also feels like people were not prepared for that. A lot of people expected there to be a lot more. What were your expectations going into this whole change? Did it line up being exactly what you thought for this first iteration of the cargo refactor? Less, more?
So, like all I expected from Cargo Refactor was that instead of the massive boxes that are pretty much glued together, all the boxes are just separated and we can move them with tractor beams. That was it. Like I wasn't expecting anything more than that. Like it was going to be the same commodities that we were going to be trading and moving around. The same economy. I wasn't expecting that to change. Like I thought that they may have been able to add the loading times for cargo, but I was like, when I thought about it more, it's like, really, if they're like, for how long they took to work on it and the little information that they gave up until recently, it was one of those things where it's like, I'm pretty confident that they weren't going to have the timers in there. Like, thinking about it from a developer standpoint, this is like the cargo boxes themselves, because the cargo is now being physicalized, the box and the contents are technically separate to each other. That was what CIG was aiming for, and what they spoke about years ago when they were talking about cargo and how they're going to physicalize it. So, some of the things that they did mention about, the cargo boxes, like you may be able to actually scan them and see the contents of them. Now, people sit there and go, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Well, it kind of is for pirates in the sense that we're not going to take a box that's like only got 10% full, because a 1 SCU box is a 1 SCU box regardless of how much is in it. So if it's only got like, for example, if we went with Laranite, if it was only 10% full of Laranite, and we would just leave it. We wouldn't bother wasting our time trying to grab that box.
Yeah.
We'd be going after all the boxes that are 100%. And just leave the ones aren't full, because it's not worth our time and effort to do that. So with what Cargo Refactor is presented for its tier 0 implementation, it fulfilled the expectations that I was expecting. But I've always treated cargo and trade as separate things. I've always treated it as separate. Even though you need to do cargo hauling to be able to trade now, it's not always going to be the case later. And some players, like some content creators out there, they're already engaged in a certain level of trading gameplay where they'll hire other people to fly their ships for them. They'll fly to the outpost, fill that ship up, and that person, somebody else flies the ship for them. And realistically, that's what trade gameplay actually is that you're buying the commodities and somebody else is moving them for you. That's a smart way of doing it. So when CIG was talking about Cargo Refactor, in my mind, it was always just going to be about boxes being physicalized first, because that's what we really need for, that granular gameplay that encourages piracy gameplay, that has cargo haulers doing more than just, sitting there going, all right, I'm moving a box from A to B. They've got to start thinking about their load times. Eventually, those boxes, the mass of them, will actually start influencing the way that ships handle. CIG talked about that. So load balancing as well, where you're positioning those boxes. Fuel efficiency could also become a thing. The heavier the boxes that you've got on your ship, the more fuel that you're consuming. There's a wide range of factors that can actually be brought in through the tier 0 implementation of Cargo Refactor that CIG has started with. And the unfortunate thing is that we don't see all the work that they've done on Cargo Refactor. We're only just seeing the physicalized boxes that we can move with tractor beams. But there's so much underlying stuff there that isn't apparent yet, and we're going to have to wait until the next iteration of Cargo Refactor for us to really be able to see it. And even then, we still don't know what that's going to entail. We've got to wait on CIG for that, and they may not do anything with it until they decide to put Quanta in.
Yeah,
we don't know.
Yeah, and you made a good point in saying that there was underlying stuff going on here. Kind of ties back to something you said a little bit earlier about how scanning boxes is a big deal for you guys. I feel like being able to scan cargo out in the verse is pretty big overall for the game, because the more things that you can reliably scan with your ship, the more reliably you can go out and actually explore. There's no point in exploring right now, because if you go out to the asteroid belt, send out a ping to see things, even if there's a derelict ship off to the side, you won't detect it. You only detect minables, right? So the more that we're starting to get things like actual cargo boxes showing up, the more realistic it is to go somewhere to actually find stuff, which I think is also pretty cool. But as far as you were saying with your expectations for the cargo refactor and how you set them, it sounds like it was a mixture of what CIG has said in the past, but also how little they said in the time leading up to this that told you this is going to be a very basic implementation.
Yeah, like when they mentioned the whole soft death thing, that wasn't really expected, but that doesn't really tie in too much with the cargo refactor. That's more a ship behavior thing, and that's a clear indication that CIG is trying to encourage piracy gameplay to us. But yeah, like my expectations weren't high with cargo refactor tier 0. Like it's been like it was literally for me just going to be able to like the boxes that get loaded onto a cargo hauler are going to be individual boxes that snap together, and you're going to be able to move them around with a tractor beam tool from one ship to another, or like just move it around however you want. That was it.
I was totally of the belief. I really thought we were going to get simulated timers. I understand that they probably, actually, I won't say that. I can see why people would be happy that we don't get simulated timers, because it would feel a little silly to like say you want the cargo and then go out to your ship and it's not there, and you're like look at your Moby glass and it's like, okay, 2 minutes until your cargo's gonna pop up in the middle of your ship. I could totally get casual players coming in and being like, what is the point of that? That we have a lot of those situations where they half implement a feature, people are really annoyed with it, and it gets a lot of pushback. So like I get them waiting until they have the actual manual loading to do those timers, but I did think that was what we were going to get with the commodity kiosks at least.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I don't know if you remember the Star Citizen Live. I can't remember the exact episode, but it was when they were talking about the cargo elevators. And one of the things that they were talking about was like player hangars having its own cargo elevator. So on a station where you had a hangar, you would go and buy the commodities, which would go into your like hangar's inventory. And if you wanted to grab that cargo to put onto your ship, you would have to go to your hangar's cargo elevator, pull the cargo from that. It would, the elevator would pop up with all the cargo already loaded on it, and then you'd transfer it from that elevator onto your ship.
Right.
Now, that works on the rest stops and places like Lawville, New Babbage, Area 18 and all that. But if you go to the outposts out on the moons, where that's where you get the majority of your commodities, how does it work there? Like, is it a magic elevator that just pops out of the ground? Like, and when they showed in CitizenCon their concept work for the new, outposts and stuff that they wanted to implement, and, they showed that it's got hangars there, it's like, kind of starts building up that picture that CIG kind of realized, hey, the outposts are going to need that same functionality that we're going to put in those rest stops. So we need to actually upgrade these outposts from, the tiny little habs that are there to, larger facilities that ships can land inside of, out of the elements, that a player can then go to a commodity kiosk, purchase the commodities that they want, and then, go back to the hangar that their ship's in with a cargo elevator in it that then brings up the cargo that they just bought that they can then transfer onto their ship. That's where the picture starts building up there. But it's like, you're doing that crazy detective work stuff to work all this out. You got to sit there with your bloody board and, all the newspaper clippings up and the red line,
They got
pins,
the
you're mapping
string.
it all out.
Yeah, it is. And you're talking about the underground facilities, right? Or are you talking about the cities? Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that those underground facilities are kind of a very obvious way that they can start to build in some of that deeper gameplay that they couldn't get with Outposts. Because that was something that I saw pop up. People would be like, how are they going to end up doing the Outposts? Will they have elevators that come up? Will the landing pad drop down underground and then the door disappears and then the cargo spawns? It was always a question. So it makes sense that they eventually did something like that. I hadn't drawn that connection. What do you think of we kind of touched on it, the distinction between trading and hauling, it sounds like it's not happening in 318. It's going to happen later. But there is now starting to be a distinction, specifically with the missions. Now, they said that they want to make it so that hauling missions, which don't require any sort of trading or anything like that, just have you picking up the boxes, bringing them somewhere else, and you won't be financially on the hook because pirates won't be able to get profit from taking that cargo. What are your thoughts on that?
To be honest, that doesn't really bother me. Like, it's one of those situations where it's like the idea behind the commodities, like, pirates targeting every single ship, the fear that a lot of people have, it's kind of unfounded and a little bit blown out of proportion. Like, we're really only going to go after stuff that we consider valuable. And, like, we've got to consider our own operating costs too. And theoretically, like, you could already do that without the cargo mission. So you could be trading in low profit commodities. Fluorine's a really good example. You can actually make good coin off fluorine because of its volume and the reliability of how it respawns and the sell rates too. They don't change much. It's got a low investment cost. You're not making hundreds of thousands of credits, but it's a reliable commodity to move. But it's only like 150,000 credits to fill a C2 with fluorine. And, like a pirate crew like mine, if we're running at, full crew, that's 11 people. We're going to look at that and we're going to be like, all right, even if we manage to snatch this ship and take all the fluorine off of it, we're only going to make 150K. And people go, oh, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. You made 150K. No, that's 150K split between 11 people. And then we've also got to pay for our fuel and whatever, other assets that we expended during that time. So in that example right there, like the cost of it just isn't worth it. Now, on the other side of things where, like COG mentioned about specific cargo hauling missions with commodities that aren't worth anything to us, we already have that with, it should be coming up on IAE, but we also had it during Fleet Week where we had like construction materials, AV equipment, fireworks. Like, we couldn't, you can't pirate those commodities. You couldn't do anything with them. Like, there's no place, no questions asked terminals that buy those items. Now, COG could make that so that you can sell those commodities there, but more than likely they'll probably not do that because those are limited available commodities, and they want to try and encourage players to do cargo hauling missions where I wouldn't say the risk of them getting attacked is a lot lower because we can still pirate them. Like, we just can't make profit off the commodity there. So when it comes down to, economy of effort, we'd show up, we'd come across somebody that's, doing that cargo hauling mission. And it's like, all right, you're going to fail this mission, man. If, we attack you and blow up your ship, we may not make much off of this, but, it's no skin off our nose. We'll just find another target to go and hit. But if you pay us 50K, we go away. And you don't have a problem. You continue on your merry way. And it's one of those things where it's like the opportunity to do piracy is still there. It's just you kind of got to be more flexible with how you're going to, achieve that. When people think about piracy, though, like it's the guys who are boarding the ships and taking the cargo off of the ship. But piracy comes in many forms and flavors. So, it's one of those things where it's like, the missions themselves, the player may just sit there and go, no, I don't care, just blow me up. Like, I'll give you a crime staff. We're still in Comrade range, or, I'll just pick up the next one, respawn my ship, pick up the next mission and, have another crack. But, CRG does a level of investment with some of their missions as well. Bounty hunting missions where you got to pay X amount of credits to get certain bounties. And CRG could actually do that with cargo hauling missions too, where if you want to be hauling more valuable commodities, then you got to like pay like a small premium up front to incentivize players to not just self-destruct on the first sign of pirates. So that cargo hauler is like, all right, I need to get this through or else I am out of pocket here. But it's not going to be the same as like investing 1 million credits to buy, to fill a C2 of Laranite, they could say 100,000 credits. You get to fill your C2 with Laranite, but it's an NPC mission. So, like you're not investing all those credits there.
Right.
But that's more speculation than anything. Something that CIG could go towards.
Yeah. The way that they do it is kind of makes me nervous because it does feel almost like they're putting an artificial limitation on it rather than building in, like you said, there are certain things that if you're hauling it, it's just not worth it to pirates. And it feels like they skirted the line on saying, you are not tied to it financially. Like there will be no profit for pirates. And I wonder to myself if they're saying they're just going to straight up turn off NPC pirates from the ability, or rather, now this is getting a little bit, I guess, meta, but to say that like per se quantum or a quanta in the system that's supposed to be a pirate and is supposed to attack you and spawn a virtual NPC would ignore you if you were on that specific mission, as opposed to like actually getting there and deciding that the cargo isn't worth it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I understand, because it's like the quanta is supposed to follow the same sort of process that players do in terms of assessing whether or not something is worth time and effort.
Right.
So for us, like we would look at those missions too. Like we'd see one of the problems is that like we'd have to stop the player first, scan their ship, and we'd see the commodities, and then we would be making a decision on how we'd move forward. Now, enterprising pirates are going to try and make credits regardless of what's going on. So we'd be assessing the commodities and then making a determination on what we know about those cargo hauling missions. If we know that they have to put an investment in, that they have to pay some credits to like get access to that mission, then we're going to try and make a profit off of that. We're going to say, like if it costs them, as I said before, 100K to buy into that mission, cost them 100,000 credits. We'll be like, dude, sling us 50K and, we go away. Don't sling us any money. We're just going to destroy your ship. You're going to be 100K out of pocket. Some people will be like, I don't care. Others are going to be like, this is pretty much, the worst thing ever. And once again, reputation hit could also be huge too. Because the cargo hauler NPC that gave you that mission may be sitting there going, you need to make sure that gets there. And if you encounter pirates, then you got to fight them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just self-destruct. You can't just try and cheese your way out of this encounter. You need to complete this mission. So if you get attacked by pirates, you got to sort that out. And then it becomes up to the player on how they want to deal with that. How the NPCs, behave though when there are, pirate NPCs attacking the players. Honestly, that's what CIG is going to have to work out. Like I understand the concern about like kind of gamifying the whole NPC pirates not attacking haulers on moving certain commodities, but at the same time, like some players, like it's a reality that we have to accept that just some players don't want to get pirated. So those missions may be more attractive to them. They just want to be that space trucker that's fat arming it in their freelancer, moving those boxes from A to B.
Yeah,
I don't see an issue with that.
That's fair, and I bet people will probably want to hear a stance like that from somebody who's hardcore in piracy, just to see that there is some leniency in how much like danger people need to feel in, but also kind of just like fun and not being under complete pressure all the time. But they did say that there is going to be a big reputation hit, like you said. So there's still some risk there, which is good. It's just going to come down to probably, like you said, the way they balance it all. It's a lot. There's so much that goes into all of this, from, again, like you were saying earlier, you're investing time into getting that cargo and putting it on your ship. Like it's not just about getting cargo and flying to one place. It's about finding the cargo, making sure the price is right, hiring the people to load it onto your ship, getting the cargo escort, and doing all this stuff. And they have to make sure that each and every part of that game loop is just balanced to feel good to players. That can't be easy.
I imagine that they're going to provide the tools. Like It depends on the scale of what you're looking at in terms of this gameplay, because like in higher security areas, the way I see it is that the game should cater more to like players who are more solo, more casual in their approach.
Absolutely.
So their tools will be presented to them a lot more easily. So they'll be able to hire those NPCs. They'll be able to install those AI blades that will assist them and compensate for them not having org mates, or like friends that they can just call up on a moment's notice, or people that they've prearranged ahead of time that, hey, be online at this time at this place because we're going to do this thing. It's just that casual player. Hey, I want to play a bit of Star Citizen. Going to spend an hour doing it. I might fat arm it in my bloody C2, hauling some, like Laranite around Terra. And the game provides that to them. And they may get attacked by an NPC pirate, but like if Mongrel Squad shows up in Terra, based on like what we know about what will happen with the reputation system in the future, we're probably going to be too busy fighting the UEE than to go after that casual player who's trying to fat arm it in their C2 moving that Laranite.
Yeah.
Like we'll still be trying to hunt them, but we're going to have a lot harder time doing it. So we probably wouldn't go there because it wouldn't be worth our time and effort. That's how you create that secure space that they were able to, casual players are able to engage in that gameplay. But then you've got like out on the frontier, like you're looking at Pyro now. And it's like, all right, well, if you want to have the same, level of, safety and risk mitigation as what you get in Terra, then you got to put a lot more groundwork in. Like you're going to have to track down, your own security. You're going to have to, get hold of people that can, move your cargo, or you may have to take friends with you to help load the cargo because no one's going to do it there for you. They're just going to be like, yeah, the boxes are over there. Have fun loading them. So, like when it comes to balancing this, really, like Stanton, once again, like CIG chose Stanton because they saw it as like the middle of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So when they add all, like eventually when they start adding all this, additional functionality in that helps with providing players options, what it will eventually be is that those options that they provide will help dictate, the scale of, how easy or difficult that they make things for players depending on the areas that they move around.
Yeah, the space really isn't set up for the game that we're going to be eventually playing, and you just see that effect. I mean, we talked about this last time we talked, and the difference between piracy and griefing, and how like legitimate piracy can be confused for griefing because we don't have the tools we need to either combat it or to do it correctly. And like you said, in Stanton right now, it might seem like you're screwed if you're carrying cargo because pirates might be all over you. Whereas in the future, at least in the form of Terra, the time investment needed to pirate a ship is going up a ton because now you have to disable that ship, go on board, fight them, take all the cargo, put it on your ship, and then fly away. And like you said, there'd be security all over you. So that's another good point of how it just kind of layers up to create more safety for those players.
Yeah, and like with what we're getting with Stanton now, like it's a bit of a mind shift because we don't have Pyro yet, but you kind of have to treat Stanton as being close to Pyro in terms of security requirements. So you're going to need to do a lot of it yourself. Like that's just facts. Like pirates, we're pretty much, piracy is only as difficult as what the target makes it for us now. So if they don't fight back, it's easy. If nobody's ganging up on us, it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like the security AI, like it's common now that we have security AI showing up during hits. And it's like, yeah, they're just in the way. Like one of our EMP ships will pull away, quickly, spend 5 seconds, destroy the AI security, and then come back and resume their position in the hit. It's one of those things where it's like you can't rely on them yet. They're just not quite there.
Yeah.
So this comes down to players needing to step up more. Like it's the unfortunate nature of where we're at in the game's development. Like we've just got to step up more to be able to, facilitate the gameplay that we all want later on. And it's understandable that players, there's players that don't want that, but to sit there and call us griefers that because we're, like playing the game the way that we, intend it to be played, It's one of those situations where it's like, look, like it's either you got to match what we're doing in terms of like the time and effort that we're putting into what it is now, or you got to wait until CIG's implemented the things that you want. And that's what, I think that's one of the problems that we've got with Cargo Refactor right now is that there was a lot higher expectations amongst the community
Mm-hmm.
of what Cargo Refactor was going to be. And, like the CIG once again, like didn't communicate well enough in terms of ensuring that they maintained a consistent message of what Cargo Refactor was supposed to be because they didn't talk about it enough. They pretty much said, yeah, Cargo Refactor's coming and, it's this
Yeah.
one thing, but
I
they
feel
didn't
like
really go back.
I feel like they didn't talk about it at all. I mean, I was looking back at some of the stuff from this year, and I realized that in the letter for the chairman, Chris actually refers to it as physicalization of the cargo. And I don't think they said that anywhere else throughout the year. And it wasn't on monthly reports or anything. So it really does kind of feel like they did not communicate it well enough for people to set their expectations correctly.
Yeah. And once again, like it's that problem that CIG has with communication where they'll sit there and they'll be like, yeah, like this is what this is what we're doing. But then it's like they only give half the information and players just run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, a really good recent example is during the cargo AMA, they talk about soft death of ships, but they technically added that in at the end of the ISC about Cargo Refactor, where it's like chat at like the end, and you could tell that they just tacked that in.
Yep.
But it was like that's what they were talking about there. They were talking about that soft death concept. It's just they didn't use the word soft death at all. And it was kind of like one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is something that we're kind of doing. Maybe, it might make it, might not. It's like, all right, just usual CIG talk, you just switch off.
Right.
But it's like, in that AMA, it was like, oh no, we're actually adding this thing, it's called this thing, this is what happens and these are the values that we're using. And it's like, when we saw that in the AMA, we were just cheering. We were just like, this is amazing. Like, this is one of those things that takes us a step closer to, ships being not bloody, the loop pinata where they just explode and cargo goes everywhere. Where it ends up being one of those things where it's like crash landing of ships, man. Like the times where we've pirated people and their ship survives, the crash landing. One, it looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
Their ship coming down, and I don't know if you've ever been in a crash landing ship in Star Citizen, but it is actually like a lot more visceral if you survive it. Like just the whole, like your ship coming down, you can't do anything about it, and you're there, you're looking at all your cargo, and it's like, is this just going to explode everywhere? And then you hit the ground, and like you go third person mode and you see an engine go flying off and an explosion there and you think that's my entire ship gone, and then your ship's still alive, and then you like roll over a couple of rocks. Like that should be the standard experience of how ships go down on a
Yeah.
planet or a moon.
Absolutely.
And the soft death concept helps with that. Now we've got a higher chance that ships are going to survive as opposed to the that's the exception right now. Most of the time when ships crash land, they just blow up.
Yeah.
And then you watch the cargo disappear because servers are cleaning up the, boxes so quick.
So in terms
But
of,
yeah.
oh, sorry, keep going.
No, like I was just going to say, but yeah, the, like the prospects of what they've added after the fact of, communicating a little bit more clearly, made what they were going to, like put in the game, a lot more exciting, a lot more clearer. But, once again, CIG just needs to work on that communication and make sure that they're not only setting expectations, but maintaining them and being a lot clearer about it.
Yeah.
Because players, like we've been doing it during this podcast where we just start sitting there and we start theory crafting. We start, going off in the blue yonder of, what Star Citizen is going to be.
Tons of fun.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, it sets expectations that people, go, oh, yeah, it's going to be this. And then when they get it in their hands, they're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. And I don't, do you think that, so Chad mentioned in that ISC that Chris did come over to his desk, and I didn't really get what they were saying when they were saying that in ISC, because in my mind, I'm like, wasn't this always the plan that the boxes would just be there when the ship blew up? And then they explained the soft death and AMA, and I was like, okay, that makes more sense. Do you feel like it actually happened that quickly, and that's why we just have never heard about this being part of the cargo refactor movement?
To be honest, this feels like it was tacked in at the last moment. Like, them talking about Chris coming over to Chad's desk and essentially saying, "Hey, it'd be really cool if the ships, like didn't blow up like loot pinatas all the time." And then Chad's probably sitting there going, "Oh shit, now we come up with a solution to this." Um, yeah, it does feel like this was, tacked in, but at the same time, it lines up with the future vision of how ships are supposed to go.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like ships aren't supposed to explode. You're supposed to be able to like pick a ship apart and, like keep it somewhat intact. So it's kind of like a stopgap measure, but Chris is like, hey, this is going to create a lot of cool gameplay opportunities because now, like players will be more incentivized to do shipboardings because that's a big thing. Like, a lot of player pirates, a lot of pirate organizations who aren't active, they're waiting for this type of thing to be available to them.
yeah,
And they're waiting for that word to go, hey, like ships aren't going to explode if you put too much damage on them. You're going to be able to board that ship and you're going to have to take that cargo because like the standard for what people consider piracy in Star Citizen is board the ship, take the cargo, and doing that right now is a lot harder than what people understand. And like one, you got the range of different thought process on the possibility of it in the first place. A lot of people are still adamant you can't do it, and I'll drop like 5 videos showing us doing it, and they're like, oh, you guys are just like using glitches and cheating, and like you're just griefing and you're not getting any sort of profit out of this. And it's like, well, like our mentality behind doing shipboardings now, yeah, we may not profit from every single hit that we do, but it's about the experience because CIG can't wipe our experience unless they change, mechanics drastically. But even then, like that experience base, we start from a higher level with the next set of mechanics that CIG do introduce. So for us, for Cargo Refactor right now, when we start doing piracy in 318, it's just an extension of what we've already been doing for years now. It's just we're more incentivized to push for those shipboardings because we have a higher chance of those ships not exploding like a loot pinata,
yeah.
but also the cargo's physicalized. So now we can pull it off
It's
and
actual
put it
profit.
onto our own ships.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's actual profit. But the other side of it is that the target now has more of an incentive to fight back too, because the time that it takes to move all of that cargo puts us in a very vulnerable position, especially if we, soft kill that ship. So it's just that floating husk there, because we may end up doing it in monitored space. We'll end up with crime stats. Some of us may have bounties. So now we've got player bounty hunters showing up looking for us.
mm-hmm.
And they'll see that, like that cargo hauler that's in distress and be like, hey, I'm going to help this guy out too. I'm going to claim this bounty on these guys. I'm going to help this guy out. We're going to have to deal with that threat while we're trying to move cargo. And if that, the target has friends, they're going to start showing up in combat ships.
Yep.
I imagine that we're going to see a bloody hammerhead show up and just start, with bristling guns on it. And it may not seem like a big deal now because of, like how easy it is to kill that hammerhead. And, like if you're about to die, just quickly, fly away at max speed. But when we get the master mode changes where SCM is like locked to certain speeds, we're not going to be able to, just run away at, like a drop of a hat to recharge shields. Because if we want to move that fast, we have to drop our shields going into QCM. And this is where, like, once again, we go back to that board where it's got all the newspaper
Everything's
clippings
connected.
on it.
Yeah.
And it all starts, coming together. It's just once we go back to CIG's communication problem where they're not helping the community put the pieces together. It's like they're kind of just sitting there and they're kind of hoping that we all kind of work it out along the way. And it's just like a lot of people aren't that invested into the project as what some people are.
Yeah.
And like for me, I'm just sitting there going, oh yeah, I understand what's going on here, and the possibilities of how all this happens, because I am that dude with the bloody newspaper clippings and all the red line and everything connected to each
That's
other.
why you're on the green screen,
Trying to,
right? You don't want anybody to see your
yeah,
crazy montage.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Like it's I got 3 walls full of newspaper clippings and that. It's one of those things though, man. Like it's like I see what CIG is trying to do because I'm consuming all this, like stuff from them, and I've been doing it for years now, and a lot of backers haven't been. So when they hear about the cargo refactor and they go, oh yeah, like, cargo's been changed. A lot of them haven't, separated cargo from trade yet.
Yeah.
So they're just sitting there going, hey, trade must be getting some, love too, because it's going to encourage piracy, right? And it's like, no, not really.
I
Like they
wish.
don't need to. Like, dude, so do we. Like we want the economy to be a lot better. We want more
Yeah.
cargo haulers. We want more,
Well,
trade happen.
Because like you said, I mean, you hail down a person or you stop a person in space. Let's say they're in a C2, right? You stop them, you soft death their ship. They're still technically locked up on that top deck and all the cargo's down below. So like you guys jump on board, you do everything you need to, you break in, you get to that cargo deck, you guys are loading the cargo, but at the same time you're watching that elevator, that ladder to see if the player's coming down. And you're also waiting to see, hey, do they have reinforcements coming in? Do they have people coming in? And as soon as they do, that could turn into a 5, 6, 10 player dogfight. And that's just a ton of gameplay coming from just a single person getting pulled over by some pirates. Now, I understand people don't necessarily want to be pulled over by pirates, but in the grand scheme of things, this is leaning towards that reality that Star Citizen has been, advertising that, hey, this is a universe where things happen and things are going to respond to those things happening.
Yeah, that's right. And to be honest, like I hope a lot more people are excited about it. Like, Salty Mike, we've pirated him twice, right?
Mm-hmm.
First time he had a terrible experience. He got stuck in a turret. Like we hit their carrack. They were rock mining. We hit them while they were rock mining. We disabled their carrack, and he's sitting in the turret. And like I watched his stream afterwards, after we had finished the hit, and he was sitting in the turret, and he's like, "This is terrible. Like this is shit. I can't do anything. Like my turret's disabled. The ship's off. Like I thought I was supposed to get in the turret and be able to shoot back and fight." And then when they found out that we were on board their ship and we're doing the shipboarding side of things, like he tried getting out of the turret, and then Star Citizen happened where he bugged out and then fell out of the turret and died.
Yeah.
And like it was just a terrible experience, partially because like Star Citizen things happening, but the other side of it is like they weren't prepared for a piracy attack, and they didn't understand like how piracy works at that point. But the second time that we hit him, once again, he was rock mining, but he had friends with him this time. And we had to fight the friends, and there were ships exploding and, like guns going off. And then Mike just he just didn't care by this point. And ironically, this was probably the best thing that he did by not caring about winning or losing. He engaged in the gameplay in a way where he was like, you know what, I'm just going to pull out my railgun and I'm just going to start shooting things. I'm going to shoot the people who are attacking me with my railgun, and, let's see what happens. He destroys one of our EMP ships doing that, and he almost kills a second one in the process. We drop one of our guys down to go and take out Mike so that we can get to his rock, and fortunately, Desync helped Mike out a lot here, but, like, we had to go to that level. Like, we couldn't close our ships to where Mike was because he had a railgun and we couldn't see him. So he was providing a threat. He was engaging in the gameplay. And if he'd been able to hold out longer, the people that we had just finished off beforehand were respawning and getting in ships to come back. And then it would have been an even bigger fight. And we all had crime stats. So if they had call to arms or if they had our bounties, they were going to send us to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And that would take us out of the game loop a lot longer than we could take them out of the game loop.
Well,
thus increasing their chances of succeeding and fighting us off.
And so the crime stat, I mean, a lot of the things that you mentioned there, I think are some of the biggest problems with this starting to happen. And it's it's just a problem that we have with everything that happens with this game, and that is that it's in alpha, and a lot of the features that you need to do that stuff just aren't fleshed out, don't exist, or break often. Like Salty Mike got stuck on the turret, right? But the law system isn't really in a place to support this all that well. The vehicle tractor beams aren't yet in the game, and even something as simple as like cutting into a ship isn't quite where they want it to be. So I'm sure you guys do something where you damage the door enough where it opens, but like
Yeah.
you can't hack your way onto the ship. You can't really like cut into the cargo bay necessarily. So it is kind of weird that you still have to do it that way. There are like a lot of things that make this gameplay feel like it's not supposed to be happening yet, because that stuff just isn't there to support it. So I get that kind of frustration. One of the big things that I've been wondering about is what actually I've seen this pop up quite a few times. If you're defending yourself against people who are breaking onto your ship, you could get a crime stat for that, right?
If it's done in Comare range and you're the aggressor that does more damage first, then yes, you will get the crime stat. There's a lot more nuance to the law system than what people realize, but because things happen so fast in the game, you don't really get to see it. Like, a lot of people don't know that there's a hostility system in Star Citizen. It was added back in 3.16, and it catches a lot of people out, because what the hostility system is that you can do a certain amount of damage to someone before you show up red. And the
Right.
reason for that is because there are a lot of players who would accidentally shoot security, and previous to this system being added,
me.
they'd shoot the security guy, one bullet. Oh, we've all been there, man.
Yeah, because they
One
just come
bullet.
into your dogfight. They're like, I'm here to help.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they get in the way, and then you
Yeah.
shoot them, and then they're all shooting at you, and you're
Yep.
like, well, guess I'm going red. But yeah, like, this was to kind of counter that sort of thing. The problem is, though, is that a lot of players don't understand that, how it actually works, and that there's a damage threshold, and that if you play your cards right, you can bait players into gaining a crime stat using this. Because a lot of players, and this is a game design flaw, is that red means dead. As soon as somebody's red, you should start killing them. That you need to kill them.
Mhm.
But the problem is that with the hostility system, yeah, they'll show up as a hostile, but that doesn't mean that they've got a crime stat and that they're a criminal. Which means that if you end up doing more damage to them before they do enough damage to you, you could end up with the crime stat first. In which case, they can send you to jail. And that's one of those things where it's like, CIG needs to address that.
Mhm.
One, it's an education thing that a lot of players, need to gain. They need to understand that. But two, like, the game needs to teach them that too. And the game needs to be able to assist players in learning that in a way where they don't end up with the crime stat and in prison. Like, realistically, players should be learning that without getting sent to jail.
Right. And so that it worries me that they haven't really specified that yet, in that if you do get attacked and your ship soft deaths and the people come on board to try and finish you off, you could shoot them first, get a crime stat, and end up in jail, which I think is a good example of the game not really having the supporting features for this to happen fluidly. And again, we're in the alpha, so this kind of stuff is going to happen, but it seems like it could be a big source of frustration.
Yeah, like, we're in this position where it's like, the players who know enough about the law system are able to skirt it well enough that we can put other people in a worse off position than what they should be able to be in.
Yeah.
Like, flying into mining laser beams, for example, is a really good way of giving a miner a crime stat.
Oh, that's
Just
so
fly into
rude.
their beam while they're mining, and they get a crime stat. Then it's like, well, like, you can't go to a station now, mate. Good luck. Or, like, we could just send you to prison ourselves. And they just sit there going, that was a dick move.
Yeah.
And it is. 100%. It is 100% a dick move. But, this is something that to be honest, I don't think the community complains enough about. Like, there's a lot of players like to complain about griefing and about PvP, but really, like, I see the systems that need to be put in place to help shape PvP, shape player behavior so that griefing is less, and they're not addressing CIG in a way that helps them in the long run. Because CIG does intend on fixing these things. They do intend on making the law system more robust.
I'm surprised
The
they
problem
haven't.
is though, is that I don't think enough people are complaining. That's the thing.
No.
And I don't think enough of them have been. They're complaining about the wrong thing. They keep attacking people who are going, "Oh, these people can do this thing," and it's like, well, they can do that thing because CIG hasn't put in the systems that prevent that from happening or deter them from doing that. Now, in 318, we do actually get a slight deterrent to committing crimes. There's only there's two places where you'll be able to clear crime stat: prison and SPK.
Mm-hmm.
And SPK is pretty much a fortress full of security forces. So if you want to clear your crime stat, you're going to end up getting more criminal charges. And you've got to fight through, you got to get onto the station and it's bristling with turrets. So you're showing up there red. You're fighting your way onto the station itself. You got to fight your way through to get to the terminal to be able to hack your crime stat away. And during that entire time, you're racking up additional charges. So the amount of time that you're sitting there clearing your crime stat, it grows exponentially. Now, depending on how the prison gameplay side of thing goes, because CIG has already confirmed the card for prison sandbox activities.
Mm-hmm.
If prison sentences get increased again back to where they were, where level 5 crime stat was like 12 hours, 13 hours, or something like that. What we'll end up seeing is like a lot of players going, all right, well, I need to be a bit more careful about how I commit crimes. Some players will just be like, I don't care, I'll just sleep off the sentence because their gaming sessions have enough time where they can get away with that. The CIG may or may not decide to address that. That's entirely up to them. But for a lot of people who are playing Star Citizen, the worst thing that you can do, especially for pirates, like if we really want to be able to get a good session in, the worst thing that you can do is get a level 3 crime stat at the start of the event. That's going to go for like 4 hours. So you're going out pirating for 4 hours and you end up with a bounty on your head, which means that you can't really go into Comrade range. And we're going to have to turn Comrades off to make sure bounty hunters don't show up mid-hit while we're trying to take down this cargo hauler who could have, their own counter escorts, who could have turret gunners.
Do you guys deal with that? Sure. Is it regular pressure if you're in Comrade range?
No, we try not to operate with crime stats.
Okay.
That's one of the things. Like, for me, it depends on the server that I go to.
That should already not be possible.
Reputation is really what's going to fix that one. Like organization reputation and player reputation. But I technically have a reputation amongst a few orgs. And if I go onto oceanic servers, I know that if the moment that I end up with a crime stat, they're going to start looking for me if they're on the same server as me, because they know what I do. They know that I'm a pirate, and they will come looking for me because they want to stop piracy, and that's cool. I'm okay with that. And that's something it's kind of like, for me, I've seen a bit of a preview of what the future will be for pirates, operating with a reputation as a known pirate, and security forces know that you're a pirate, and you may not have a crime stat, but you may have a slew of criminal charges against your name, all to do with murder, stealing, piracy, vehicle destruction. Your rap sheet's 10 pages long of all these crimes that you committed. Just because you don't have a crime stat on your head doesn't mean that you're not a criminal. And that's where the reputation system can come into play, and where the whole criminal system needs to be expanded on, where your criminal record needs to be separated from the crime stat.
Yeah, because crime stat right now can really mess somebody up. I was just thinking of a hypothetical situation where a pirate group will attack a player, and the whole thing plays out. The player defends himself. The pirates come on board, kills him, shoots him, gets a crime stat. But then because their ship soft deathed, they technically have no way of leaving. So it's just them with a crime stat, their cargo's there, and then legal security starts showing up and like shooting the ship. It just feels like that could be a really terrible experience based around this whole
Oh,
system.
that cargo hauler ends up with a bounty on their head, so the player bounty hunter shows up after that hauler managed to fight off all the pirates, and then a player bounty hunter shows up, boards the ship, and takes them out anyway.
Right.
Like that whole scenario could theoretically happen now. And the thing is like it's probably going to happen a lot more than what we realize, but CIG really isn't in that position to address it. But an unfortunate reality that we're facing with what we see in this community is that the players will complain about the griefers who boarded their ship and put them in that position in the first place, as opposed to the law system not being robust enough to be able to handle the situation of player pirates boarding someone's ship.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, I personally think that CIG needs to invest more time and effort into, the law system from a reputation side of things.
Yes.
And making sure that they separate the crime, like the criminal system, the criminal system, separating your criminal record from your crime stat level. Like the way I've always thought of the crime stat level as like the GTA star system. Like your stars go up, they go down.
Your immediate,
you gain
yeah.
heat, you lose heat. It's pretty much the heat that you draw on yourself in the moment. But your criminal record, like that should be something where you're like dealing with, like going to SPK is going to be a pain in 318. Like you will need a group to be able to go there to clear your crime stat the regular way.
Yeah.
So what we're probably going to see is a lot of players just going, I'm just going to go, go cycle through prison, use a revolving door system there. And obviously CIG wants to test things in the game, so they're probably just going to let it slide for a bit so that they can, have the sandbox activities in prison tested out. But at the same time, we're going to have a huge outcry from a lot of players who don't understand the game mechanics as in depth as what, those who engage in piracy do. But at the same time, they're going to complain about the wrong thing as well. And instead of sitting there going, hey, you need to address the law system so that we can deal with these pirates better, they're going to sit there and go, you need to, get rid of these griefers because they're ruining my game experience. They keep, giving me a crime stat. CIG needs to make it so that pirates can't give players crime stats. That's the real thing.
And like you said, CIG needs to communicate these things because players are going to get caught in these situations and have no clue what's going on. I mean, even the rescue beacon functionality isn't really in a place where if you get blown up and you're soft deathed in a ship and you have to put out a beacon for somebody to help you, you can't specify, I have cargo that needs to be picked up. I have a vehicle with me. I'm out in this location. I need help. It's just a very simple thing that honestly a lot of people will use to just find targets to go after.
And like CIG expects players to be using the global chat system, like the rescue beacons, for example.
Yeah.
They're like, we want to be able to make it a bit more diegetic, in the long run, where you make your beacon and then it creates channels and all that. It's, but for now you just, talking global chat. And it's like, all right, well, one of the things that CIG forgot to do was give players who are down the ability to talk in global chat to start with, so it didn't help them out until the players went, hey, if you want us to do that, you need to give the down people access to the chat.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of players don't even know how to use the comm system right, where they can create custom channels and invite somebody to that without inviting them to the party, or, being able to use VoIP or inviting people to the party in the first place.
Yeah.
And pirates definitely do use global chat to gain intel and, see what people are doing. And the amount of times, man, that I've, like me and the guys were just, hunting around a server, and then we see a miner talking about how they found this really good quant rock on bloody Walla, near this outpost, and we're going.
You go into global and say, "Oh, nice, where?"
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes we'll put out bait too, and we'll start talking about, hey, is anybody having any issues? Like doing this one particular thing.
Oh, you're
like
terrible.
selling stuff. Yeah, it's one of those things where like we'll start fishing for information to determine whether or not like there's actual people doing hauling or anything like that and where they're at so that we can start looking in those areas. Like that's just a pirate tactic right there. That a lot of players don't understand because a lot of people are naive to what's actually possible in the game.
Yeah.
CIG, going back to that communication thing, CIG doesn't really communicate that well enough. Like they'll sit there and go, yeah, there's piracy in game, but then they're kind of relying on all the content creators to go, yeah, this is how piracy works in Star Citizen.
Yeah.
The CIG sitting there going, yeah, that's piracy right there. But they're kind of like taking their own notes down and going, like this, there's this paragraph that says, yeah, this is what piracy should be. But when we start going into the nuances of, the equipment, the ships, the tactics and all that sort of stuff, they're kind of like, yeah, we'll kind of massage that out along the way.
Mm-hmm. There's a certain amount that they should let us discover on our own, but there's a number of things that need to be told specifically to the player base so they're not getting caught up in these kinds of things. And I think this refactor is definitely going to be maybe not like a wake-up call, but another reminder that is the case, that people are playing this game on different levels, and we need to start to like step up and get ready for that. I'm personally going to use 318 as a chance for my organization to get a lot better at defending ourselves in terms of ship and in FPS combat, because this stuff from here on out, I mean, it's not going to be a perfect situation, but it's now a possibility, and there's reasons to be actually going out and extorting or holding people up and breaking into their ship. And I think you guys really set the standard for that. But I expect to see a lot more groups taking a hand at it now.
Yeah, like we've inspired a lot of other piracy, orgs to form, and like they've watched our videos and they've gone, you know what, we're going to give that a crack too, and they'll be kicking around like 3 friends just deciding to go out and do a bit of piracy, and they'll watch our videos and they'll go, okay, we'll do what these guys did and see how we go. And I've spoken to other piracy organizations, and they're like, the reason why we exist is because we watch your videos, and we're like, we want to do that too. So we started copying what you guys did, started looking for the same targets that you guys are doing and using your tactics. And then they start building up their own little reputation and building up their own tactics and how they operate. And it's it's really cool to think that like we've been at the forefront for piracy gameplay in that sort of respect, but at the same time, like, we're still learning from other people as well. Like Metroximus with his tactic of making people walk the plank was brilliant, where he'll go out to medical rescue beacons and he'll like rescue the person, but he'll charge them more, and he'll be like, okay, you can either pay me X amount of credits or you can walk the plank.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, some people paid, some people walked the plank, and other people tried fighting. And some of them beat him, and they were on his ship when this happened, so they had his ship too. So they're able to get away. And this is one of those situations where it was like, he was on his own. So it wasn't like, a whole huge gang of people like, what we'll run around with, showing up to go, hey, to one guy, hey, like, give us X amount of credits or else we're just going to beat up on you. But that was just like a more inventive way of doing extortion, where players had a bit more choice, could think through the their options, and could respond in their own way however they wanted. Because at the end of the day, like, Star Citizen is about presenting problems for gameplay, and you've got to come up with solutions to them.
Yeah,
and
it's a sandbox game, and it's becoming more and more clear as these kinds of features come in. And I think above all else, do you think this is going to evolve piracy? Do you think it's going to make a big difference to piracy, or does it feel sort of just another half step up?
For us, it won't change much for piracy in terms of like how we operate. What we'll probably see is more pirates operating. The only way that piracy is going to evolve now with the introduction of Cargo Refactor is how the rest of the player base responds to it.
Mm-hmm.
If they actually decide to, band together and start fighting back, which I'm 100% for, man. Like, some of the considerations that I'm making in terms of our composition, because we focus a lot on using distortion damage to disable ships. And from a tactical standpoint, come 318 with limited places to clear crime stats, which means that we're also going to end up with bounty markers on our heads during piracy hits, and also the also that, you know, like soft death of targets fixing us in a single place for a long period of time, we could end up in a position where we're fighting outnumbered and we fight a losing battle. Like, we've fought plenty of times. Like, one of the dumbest things that you can do in terms of, you know, flight combat is fly red near a station and just keep fighting everybody that keeps coming out of the station.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's an organized group, because even if you're better than them at combat, they will eventually beat you, because you can't keep up with them being able to respawn all the time, and you will eventually get whittled down. It may take 1 to 2 hours for it to happen, but it happens, and you'll lose that fight. And that's the same situation that we're going to be looking at now with piracy game players, where if players take it seriously enough that a piracy attack is like all hands on deck, somebody puts a call out and says, "Hey, I'm being attacked by pirates, can I get help?" And, you know, like, I've seen it before, like, players will put the call out and they'll actually have some people respond, and they're not showing up with, you know, credits in mind or anything like that. They're just showing up to help. Normally it's not, you know, a well coordinated effort, but what we'll see, and, you know, the possibility of this happening is a lot higher, but it depends on players actually doing it, is that they band together and they go, we want to engage in the gameplay and start dealing with these pirate players. And, you know, like, I'm 100% for it, and that's probably going to influence, you know, my group's composition loadout, so that we move a bit further away from using distortion damage to try and encourage, you know, like, us doing soft deaths on ships more, fixing us in place and forcing us to have to fight, you know, transferring cargo under fire. You know, like a space battle going on and all the Marines are there throwing boxes from, you know, the target ship into another cargo ship. And, you know, like, we're there trying to fight off all the, you know, counter attacks and all that sort of stuff. On the flip side, it also gives security orgs the opportunity to recover that cargo by attacking the pirates and using their tactics against them too.
Yeah.
So
it definitely feels like it's going to make a difference. I hope that, like you said, lawful players, orgs, and overall the community itself kind of starts to band together and have a standard way to deal with this stuff, calling for help, people understanding that calls for help, what that means and how to respond to it. I do think that we're lacking a few things, definitely supporting features that will help with this stuff, vehicle tractor beams, a better law system, enough money in the system and economy to actually give people incentive to do all this stuff. But I see this being a big shift for the game overall. Like you said, even maybe not so much for pirates, but for normal players like myself. But overall, it's exciting. It's exciting. It's a little nerve-wracking because obviously they've missed some things and it's not completely solidified, but I'm interested in seeing how it goes. As kind of just to close off here with the conversation, do you have any final statements that you wanted to make on this cargo refactor, or things that you think people should keep in mind as we approach its release in 3.18?
don't be surprised that pirates just go for 100%. Like 100% the prize. Like, they are going to do everything that they can to take everything from you, because there's no reason not to. So you should be incentivized, using that as your incentive to fight back with everything that you've got. Like, focus on the experience as opposed to the profit, though, because the experience that you gain by fighting back is going to help you in the next attack. And if you end up getting pirated by, 10 times in a row and you fight back the first 9 times, you may succeed on the 10th time, and then the 11th, and then the 12th. So use this as a learning experience. Don't focus on losing your stuff.
That's 9 times going and having to re-equip my whole inventory, clean my ship.
We go through it too, man.
Yeah.
We go through it too.
Yeah, there's definitely struggles involved, but it's exciting. It feels like we're going to start to actually see piracy taken seriously, and the lines are starting to be drawn in the system. I hope they can upgrade the law system and the reputation system to accommodate this next year at the latest, because we're gonna need we need some help figuring all this out. But Agensleti, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me for this, man. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and get a little bit of a opinion from the other side of the law. I actually will probably, I love to get a chance to like see how you guys operate and come out and just shadow you at some point just to get that idea. But I appreciate that you guys are trying something different. I've seen different groups do like exploration stuff when people say there's not exploration in the game. People are doing touring stuff when people say there's no touring. You guys are doing piracy when people say there's no piracy. So it's cool to see that kind of stuff happen in the game, and I appreciate you talking to me about it and giving your insights on the cargo refactor.
Thanks for having me, mate. It's always good to have a chat about piracy and Star Citizen in general.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a lot of comments and opinions on this one, so I look forward to seeing how you guys feel about all this. But if you didn't know, anybody who does support the channel can indeed come on here live, ask us questions for a Q&A session afterward, and chat with us while we're talking. Otherwise, Agensleti, you want to let everybody know where they can find your own content and what kind of content that is?
So we have a YouTube channel. If you YouTube Mongrel Squad, Star Citizen Piracy Gameplay, you'll find us there. Or you can go youtube.com/c/Mongrel Squad. That will take you straight to our channel. We're also on Twitter. I'm not 100% sure how Twitter works, but if you're at Mongrel Squad,
it's changing now.
I'll probably see it. Yeah, it's up in the air, so I don't know what's going to happen with it. But yeah, we're on Twitter as well. And yeah, that's pretty much the main ways to find us.
Cool. Well, thanks again for joining me. It's been a good talk. For those of you who are watching or listening on a platform after this, make sure to leave a comment, maybe a like, subscribe, or a review if you're on an audio platform. I appreciate it. And make sure to check out our other podcast. I should have left an ad in the middle of this one, but if you didn't hear it, check out our other podcast, Citizen Central. Happens once a month, and we bring together 4 or 5 people and just chat about the bigger topics. So check that one out as well, coming out soon. Agensleti, one last time, thank you so much. And I'll see all you next week.